It's true that all of the energy market is driven by policy, and policy is driven by politics. And that's why it's so important that people get out and support candidates who can uphold the IRA and make sure that we have the support that we need to make the green revolution happen.
We are live at the Power Up Live stage, presented by CPS America. I'm your host, Nico Johnson. I'm here live in Boston at RE+ Northeast, and I'm joined by Joan White, the Director of Energy Storage Policy at SEIA. Is it policy? Is that on the end of the title?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it.
Perfect. Joan, there is much ado about energy storage, is certainly in the last 18 months, and with passage of the IRA, the last 12 months have really underscored what we all knew to be true, that there's not an energy transition without energy storage, and we really can get to 80+% renewable energy penetration today with the energy storage capacity, the renewable energy products that we have on the market. Yet, there are some elements of the Inflation Reduction Act, in particular domestic manufacturing, that could, by some folks' assertion, be much ado about nothing. And so I wanted to have a chance to unpack this a little bit with you and better understand how close we really are within the construct of the Inflation Reduction Act to truly having domestic manufacturing of energy storage products here in the USA. So we'll start there.
Yeah, so you've probably seen all the headlines that there are a lot of factories breaking ground over the next 3 to 5 years. But the real question is, when is that product going to be available for people to deploy in the market? So what we're seeing is we're expecting more factories to actually come online, like in the 2027 time period, and then production to be ramping up so that we're going to be able to meet domestic need by about 2030 or so. And remember, when production first comes online, it's very inefficient. So you lose about 50% of your product until you spin up that factory. People really get to know how to make the product. So we're hoping that by 2030, our domestic factories will achieve a 90% efficiency rate. And some of the policies that support that are in the IRA. We've got an advanced domestic manufacturing tax credit, as well as a domestic content adder for projects that are put in the ground. So with that policy support, I think we're going to see a real boom in the energy storage market in 2024.
I think that I often say a boom in the storage market, and my friends in the energy storage sector don't like when we use the word boom related to batteries. Go figure.
It implies a bust.
That's right.
Which, yeah.
Well, and what's interesting is I'm old enough to now have been in the market when we had BP and Solar World and Twin Creeks, and I could go on. The list is long of failed solar panel manufacturing in the United States. So there is a kernel of truth to the concern that this is potentially a boom bust cycle. And when I hear all the way out to 2030, it gives me hope, at least, that we're closer to my retirement at some point before we see a battery sector collapse. But I really want to believe that this is something that we're investing in for the long term. Are there core elements to the current policy and the movement in the industry that suggest this is more than a 5-10 year cycle?
Oh, I absolutely think so. So the tax credits in the IRA are a long kind of duration tax credit. So that gives the industry certainty that they can invest, they can really be in it for the long haul.
Are there any clawbacks that would suggest you have to invest and stay for a certain period of time before you're able to mature that incentive?
Yeah, there are no clawbacks, but the domestic manufactured content is really what's going to support the market.
Sure.
So projects that are going in the ground can get a little adder for the domestic content that they have.
Okay.
And that's going to ensure that there's a sustainable market nationwide for domestically manufactured batteries.
Yeah. Can we unpack a little more the other incentives for energy storage in the IRA? Because domestic manufacturing tends to win the conversation most of the time, but there are numerous incentives for energy storage because it is a sector that is so desperately needed for the energy transition to really mature.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the biggest thing that the IRA did for energy storage was make the standalone ITC tax credit permanent for standalone storage.
Okay.
So prior
Permanent.
to the IRA, Yeah.
I love that word.
I know,
Permanent.
permanent. I love it too. So we didn't see, you've probably heard of the solar coaster, which
Yes.
was the ITC tax credits had to be renewed
Indeed.
every 5 years.
Yeah.
And
Put
so
solar
you'd see
on it.
Yeah, exactly. So we, in the storage sector, are very lucky to avoid that. That
Extremely.
our standalone credit and then the paired credit have been kind of enshrined in law as a tax credit, permanently. So.
Permanently.
Yeah.
Until when? Pardon me for being skeptical.
I mean, it's true that all of the energy market is driven by policy, and policy is driven by politics.
Yes.
And that's why it's so important that people get out and support candidates who can uphold the IRA and make sure that we have the support that we need to make the green revolution happen.
You mentioned policy, and so it's worth noting you were moderating a panel on rate design, which is one of the wonkiest possible energy topics.
Yes.
And so I'll spare the viewers and listeners the wonkery. Maybe I'll have you on and we'll go really deep on rate design because I know that you love to noodle on it. But are there, 3 or 4 really key facts that folks need to better understand to incorporate into their business or their dinner table conversation, the importance of rate design, effective rate design for energy storage?
Yes, this is an area, energy storage is so new that utilities don't have a good handle on how to make rates that work for storage. So the thing to understand is that storage is both load and generation. And that means you're buying electricity. And how much that electricity costs can deeply impact your project economics. So the first thing that utilities should do is look at whether they have demand charges that apply to storage and how those are applied. So I would argue, because storage doesn't usually charge during peak times when electricity is most expensive, that we shouldn't have high demand charges.
Yeah.
It's a flexible load that we can time and synchronize up to the grid, and the rates should reflect that. So if you get good rates in place, then projects become economical. But in many service territories, they're not today because of how much they have to pay for electricity.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. I was recently having a conversation with a friend about the impact of energy storage on the Texas grid. Specifically, why is Texas the largest market? Because it's an unregulated market, because it has high demand charges, and because everyone jumps in, I'm going to say it, to game the system. Everyone's looking at putting these storage assets on to create a windfall in the early years, recognizing that the very assets that they're using to game the system eventually stabilize the system.
Yes.
And eliminate the margin, the revenue that it was created, that the premise was based upon.
Yeah, that happens in a lot of markets. We saw that in PJM with frequency regulation a few years ago. The prices were extremely high. A lot of storage got in the game counting on that revenue. But over time, you're going to see peak reduction revenue, even capacity or energy arbitrage revenue diminish in a free market environment.
Yeah.
The biggest 2 states right now for storage are Texas and California.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that the market fundamentals are there. So they have a lot of hours in which the difference between peak energy and off-peak energy prices are very large. So you can do energy arbitrage. They also have a lot of capacity revenue available. So in California, it's resource adequacy revenue.
Right.
In Texas, there's a real need for frequency regulation and moderating that grid. So those dynamics are going to change over time. And that's one of the biggest problems we see, is that it's difficult to finance a storage project that has a 10 or 15 year payback period when your revenue certainty is only like 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So that's why public support in the form of, either not just tax breaks, but also there are some states that are rolling out kind of more significant financial support for storage to bridge that gap and create revenue certainty so that we can get projects financed.
You mentioned California and Texas as 2 states that are doing it right. We're here in Boston, Massachusetts. The Northeast has done an incredible job of being pioneers on virtual net metering and virtual power plants, even rate design that is progressive. What are some of the states that you'd point to as really getting it right with regards to energy storage right now?
Yeah, so the 2 biggest states in New England that I'd say are doing a great job are Connecticut and Massachusetts. So they've got the Connected Solutions Program, which is kind of support for behind the meter storage.
Yeah.
And then they also have, Massachusetts has a clean peak standard. So there's revenue available to kind of clean up the peaks. And for those of you who don't know, the peaking periods are the dirtiest time on the power grid. You're talking most emissions, most carbon. So the clean peak standard is great. The states that really are a little bit lagging behind is New Hampshire. It doesn't have as much financial support available for storage. We're seeing a little bit more in Maine in terms of their rate design is coming up to speed, but Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont have a lot of catching up to do. So those states could establish a procurement target, which says, we need X megawatts of storage by a certain date, and then really roll out the policies and programs to support that target.
Indeed. You mentioned a few here in New England. I'm sure that not just in New England, and down in the Southeast where I live and where many of our listeners are further afield in the West. Are there success markers or lessons learned right here in New England that other neighbors, including the ones you've mentioned, might adopt? You mentioned one. Are there others?
I would say the best, most successful program that we see on the horizon is happening in New York, and that's an indexed storage credit. Come with me, we're on a journey.
I'm on
okay,
it.
Great.
Get on the train.
You can make a certain amount of money in wholesale markets, but what projects really need to get off the ground is a level of revenue certainty and a certain level of revenue that makes them economical. So an index storage credit, which is a program that New York will be rolling out very shortly, takes what you can make in the market. You play in the market day in, day out, which means you're providing those critical services of frequency regulation, capacity, energy. But then at the end of the year, the state looks at how much you made and they give you a little top up to get you to a final line. So it's really finding that missing money that a project needs to get across the line.
Yeah. Finding missing money is a very important element to keeping a business alive. It is in many places, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, even California, a foregone conclusion that solar plus storage, and even in Texas, storage standalone is a part of any modern energy business, right? Especially if you're thinking about building a business around renewable energy. So you're at SEIA, and SEIA just put out the job census. We know that we have created a tremendous number of new jobs. We want to attract more folks into this industry. If I'm jumping into this industry, bringing my wealth of knowledge from tech or from real estate or construction, and I know that I need to add energy storage, what do you feel are the 3 or 4 truths that I need to adopt? I need to just go ahead and add them, bolt them on to be successful as a startup energy company, knowing that storage is a part of my product mix.
Yes, I love this question. We need to attract workers from every sector to come work in energy. It's so much fun. There is endless possibilities. But the things I would say, if you're installing any storage, especially behind the meter storage, you really need to be thinking about getting trained in NFPA 855. That's the most important fire code that pertains to storage. When systems are installed in accordance with 855, they're incredibly safe. So that will tell you kind of where in the home it could go, or how to safely locate storage. The next piece is you need to understand the sales proposition for storage.
Yeah.
So for a lot of customers, it depends on what segment you're in. And for the residential homeowner, we've seen in our research the most attractive thing is the reliability benefit.
Okay.
They want to know that the lights are on.
Yep. Have you seen education programs around selling storage in an appropriate way? Could you point folks to training?
Yeah, to training. Okay, so the NFPA 855, NFPA is the National Fire Protection Agency. They offer really effective online training. It's extremely affordable.
Yeah.
So I would try that. In terms of what the best ways to understand the sales pitch are, I think the industry is very much still getting there. So,
still figuring it out.
Yeah, come to RE Plus, get some of that good content.
Indeed.
We're kind of really presenting, all of our conferences fully integrate the storage perspective for your business.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely be on the lookout for someone else in the industry who would stake a claim. I'm training how to sell storage better than everyone else. If you own that education company, please reach out to us. I'll make sure that Joan knows who you are and she can refer you along as well. Joan White, as I mentioned, is the Director of Energy Storage Policy for the Solar Energy Industries Association, SEIA, as we refer to it here colloquially. Joan, it is such a pleasure to have you on the Power Up Live stage and to meet you in person.
Yeah, I really appreciate your work, and I'm just so delighted you're here.
Thank you so much.